Okay, so welcome to this morning's Thursday morning coffee chat, advancing digital literacy across Wisconsin. We have with us two guests from the Division of Extension from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Chris Stark is a community and economic development educator for UW-Madison Division of Extension. Based in Eagle River, he serves as the Economic Development Administration University, or he serves the Economic Development Administration University Center team, which has a statewide purview and is also assigned to Forest County in northern Wisconsin. His primary efforts have been under the umbrella of economic development with special emphasis on workforce development issues in rural areas and researching best practices and getting broadband infrastructure into rural areas. At present, he's working with the Wisconsin Digital Equity and Inclusion Stakeholders Group in an effort to get affordable broadband to all citizens of Wisconsin and help deploy teachers to teach digital skills necessary to help residents to be able to utilize their connectivity. Gail Hike is a professor with the University of Wisconsin-Madison Division of Extension. Gail's work with the Extension has spanned almost 38 years, where she has worked in both family and community development. In 2015, Gail transitioned to a community development broadband specialist role with Extension. As a statewide specialist, she works with communities to build broadband access and adoption. She works with communities to develop strong community planning and networking as they work to expand broadband. And her adoption work has included development and training for connecting aging communities and tech change makers. As a part of the National Digital Extension Education Team, she has developed curriculum and training for broadband access and adoption. And Gail currently serves on the Governor's Task Force on Broadband Access. So I wanted to read you those bios just to show what a breadth of connection they have to the digital and broadband initiatives across the state. And so with that, Chris, I will turn it over to you. I know he's going to encourage you all to participate, so please feel free to type in the chat or raise any questions, raise your hands, any of those, whatever option you would like to use, and we will address your questions.
Oh, thank you very much for that. As I find our presentation here, slideshow. Can everybody see that? Are we good? Give me a thumbs up, if you will, if we're good. Which I can't, of course I can't see you, but all right. So thank you for that wonderful introduction. Very good. I'll just edit. So I'm coming to you from Crandon right now. I work, as I was mentioning, work a hybrid schedule, probably 3 days, 3 days of the week from home in Eagle River, and then at least 2 days of the week, and however, as needed, in Crandon, which is the county seat of Forest County, up here in the Northwoods. It's a gorgeous day, if not a very cold morning. It was 14 below at Eagle River this morning. Nothing new this winter as I was driving across the region. And beautiful day. On the world stage, it isn't. For those of us, I'm a Czech speaker and keenly watching. I'm going off on a tangent here for a second, but keenly watching events that are happening on the world stage right now. Not one of the better days. But anyway, let's get started with our presentation here. And there we go. To begin, thought we'd, this is UW Extension and Wisconsin Literacy Organization working together for digital equity. And I want to start with the 3 A's of broadband, a field that Gail and I, especially Gail, has been working in for longer than I have, but for the past couple of years that Gail and I have been involved in, and that's access, affordability, and adoption. And the adoption piece right there is highlighted in red because we believe that we have the most opportunity for interaction with you, Wisconsin literacy, on that piece. We will address that issue later in the presentation, but we want to start by mentioning that most of our time to date has been focused on the access issue, and that means getting internet and broadband to rural areas of Wisconsin. So we've been in the past most of the time on that issue. We're starting to spend more time on affordability and adoption because of the importance of it. So what do we mean by access? So high speed, just a little bit on access here, but the high speed internet access, and this means infrastructure deployment. And I'm certainly working on that with the Forest County Broadband Commission right now on these little task forces that have sprung up throughout Wisconsin, primarily in rural areas, but very much also in urban areas as well. But that means commonly cable, not necessarily the best means of getting your internet, but it works for many people. Fiber optic, the gold standard. Wireless can work and serve well in rural areas like this here, where it's too expensive to get fiber optic. It has its limitations because of all the trees we have right here in the Northwoods in Forest County and the hills. So it's a bit challenged in, for example, the Driftless area. Satellite, you've probably heard a lot about Starlink in the past year. Elon Musk's low Earth orbit satellite. There's about 1,800 of them up there last time I checked. A lot of people are very satisfied with that, but I also send the cautionary note that Starlink is $500 a month for the equipment, so the initial investment, $500 capital outlay, and then $100 a month cost. So how sustainable is that for those of lower to moderate income? And then you have DSL, which I guess I have jokingly referred to as pre-Civil War technology there a little bit, but that's what we use to digital subscriber line. So it still works in some cases. The Federal Communications Commission, FCC, currently defines broadband as 25 megabits speed download speed, that is, and 3 megabits upload speed. That's going to change, and it has to change. And that much emphasis now, even for grants, is at 100, 100. When upload speed means businesses are doing transactions, which is good for the economy. What do we mean by affordability? So at what price can low to moderate income people really afford internet service? In other words, what is sustainable? I learned a lot when I was a volunteer grant reviewer for the National the NTIA, the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, for tribal communities from throughout the United States. It was an interesting, it was interesting for me to be a part of that in October and November of last year. So as we discuss affordability, the nonprofit Everyone On, if some of you have heard of that, they have a presence in Milwaukee now, has surveyed low to moderate income households. They had the financial wherewithal to pay for that, financed by the Microsoft and the Ballmer Group, Steve Ballmer being a former chairman of Microsoft. They surveyed households under $50,000 per year, and they went over 2,500 and some change households throughout the United States. But there's some results. That's at least some raw feedback there. 40% can't afford to pay anything for the internet, and 22% can pay $25 a month. So you have 62% of people, approaching 2/3, who are challenged to pay anything for the internet, and the remainder can pay $55 to $70. But that's a lot of internet monthly charges are not quite that low, frankly. A little bit about the Affordable Connectivity Program, because this used to be called the Emergency Broadband Benefit, and that had funds that were good for 6 months of the year. So that has morphed into now the Affordable Connectivity Program, the ACP. People are eligible for that if your income is 200% of less than the federal poverty guidelines, which are right there on this web page. And this is intended to be a much longer pool of funds for those who apply for it. For example, they've made $14 billion available. So it's going to have monies available for a couple of years. A little bit more on the ACP and affordable connectivity. The benefit provides a discount of up to $30 per month. And then, of course, $75 per month for households on qualifying tribal lands. Now, we have there, if the provider participates, when I checking for residents of Forest County, certainly the big providers, most of them are participating in this. We want to get the smaller ones involved in this program because, again, the Affordable Connectivity Program is only applicable if your provider participates. And in some cases, especially in rural areas, there isn't a lot of choice to make. Some of my constituents here in Forest County only have one, which is considered underserved right now if they have just one choice of internet, where we continue to work on that, the access deployment option. Households that are eligible for this can receive a one-time discount of up to $100 to purchase equipment, by the way. So as you see there, a laptop or desktop computer to help them access the internet.
Chris,
Yes.
we have a question. Does your internet provider have to opt into the ACP program?
They are not required to. They're not required. That's the challenge. So they have to do this out of, I don't know how else to say it, but the goodness of their own heart. Clearly, again, most of the big ones throughout the country seem to have done that. I don't know yet about the smaller ones. Haven't had that one-on-one conversation just yet on this issue. Our broadband meeting was supposed to happen on Tuesday, by the way, and it was canceled because of the snowstorm here. But I was planning to bring this up with our provider from Rhinelander, Northwoods Connect, who's deploying here in Forest County. And so that's really going to be an interesting question. I would hope they would. But, thank you for that question. About adoption, this is really a definition from, there's an entity called the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, a nonprofit started by a woman from Ohio, Angela Schieffer. And this is their definition. They've become a force nationwide. Broadband adoption is or means daily access to the internet at speeds for people that enables them to accomplish common tasks and assumes that they have digital skills necessary to participate online. That just isn't going to happen on its own, the digital skills necessary for people. That is something that where we have a role and we have an end game, if you will, to teach them. And then it assumes that they have equipment and personal devices to hook up to the internet. Barriers to broadband adoption, that is, no access, or obviously no access, is a considerable problem. The costs have been quite an issue for people. One example that comes to my mind quickly is the NDIA that I mentioned, the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, although they have no legal authority, obviously, but they called out one of the large providers for not serving a low-income area on the west side of Cleveland. They chose to build around it. They thought their return on investment would not be as good. So there you have a low-income area neglected and passed up, while that same service provider built in the suburbs of Cleveland was more likely to get a higher number of customers. Then you have the cost issue, the lack of digital devices. Again, the survey from everyone on found that a lot of people, even those with households under 15K a year, do have digital devices in many cases. I don't want to say that that's a done deal, but that wasn't the biggest problem. The biggest problem is the cost issue. And then again, people have devices. And if you hear people like Josh Edmonds, the IT director for the city of Detroit, who has been fighting this battle for a few years, he will say, we've given people digital devices, they have them, but they don't know, they just sit there because they don't know how to use them. So again, the teaching of digital skills, increasingly important. And then we have fear, of course, fear of the unknown and cybersecurity concerns, a very legitimate concern. And then lack of, in some cases, completely lack of desire to learn or utilize the internet. And Gail, I think, there you go.
I'll talk a little bit about motivational factors to learn digital skills. And I think one of the important things that we've learned is just because we build it and the infrastructure is there, doesn't mean they will come. I think that's a misconception a lot of people have. Chris talked about some of those barriers that were there. And he's right, a lot of what we have been doing on a national level has been on access, getting that infrastructure in the ground. And I think we're waking up now as a country to say, okay, just because we built it doesn't mean they're coming, and we have to figure out the digital skills and the affordability piece. And you're going to see a lot of that coming down as we look at some of the infrastructure dollars that are coming, some of the CARES dollars that have come because of the pandemic are all there. And so I think those are really important things for us to remember. My background when I came as a specialist, that's okay. When I came into it as a specialist was actually to focus on broadband, was to focus on some of the adoption part. And so a lot of what I'm sharing about motivational skills and barriers and some of the teaching and curriculum comes from that experience of doing focus groups across the state and running different pilot projects. So some of the motivational factors that we see to get folks online, I would say the number one factor that we found, and this is consistent across our research when we did literature scans, across all the focus groups we did across the state, and some of the different pilots that we were working with connected aging communities and 4-H tech change makers across the country, is number one motivational skill, staying connected to family and friends. That's kind of the carrot to get folks who aren't connected online. And I would say that since pandemic, that's become even more so. They want to stay connected in some shape or form. Ability to remain independent. I think one of the best examples I can give of this is working with some of the folks that I've worked with on some of our pilot projects. And I had someone who was in healthcare tell us he had a 90-year-old woman who he was working with who had a choice. Did she want to go home from the hospital to do her recovery, or did she want to go into a care facility? And her only option for going home was to be able to use a digital device to connect and stay connected with her healthcare provider. Well, guess what? That 90-year-old woman learned how to use that tablet to get connected to stay home. And the healthcare provider reported after her recovery, she was sold. She wasn't going to give up that digital device because she saw the things that it opened up to her. So, you know, that can be a real motivating factor for folks to remain independent. Employment, it's really difficult right now to get any job unless you can apply online. And we've seen more and more people working from home, remote work. And so learning those digital skills, as Chris said, just makes you more employable. Access to healthcare, especially in some of our rural communities right now, where healthcare providers are limited. We're finding that it's a great way for people to access, especially mental health. when the number of mental health providers across our state is so limited, being able to connect online, and some of the limiting factors that were connected through HIPAA that made it difficult to do that. Some of those have been eased somewhat during the pandemic. And I don't think we're ever going back, because we're seeing how it allows people to receive the access they really need. Applying for benefits, unemployment, veterans, just about any kind of benefit folks are applying for now, they're doing it online. Online shopping has become more and more of a motivational factor for folks to get online. People don't want to go to the stores, or what they're looking for isn't in the stores. I had one instance of a gentleman who just came to a session and said, I just want to learn how to buy my dog food. I can't get dog food for my dog. And so that was his motivating factor, right? He wanted to shop online so he could connect and keep his dog fed and happy. Education is a huge factor. Banking is another one. A lot of our banking is done online today. And so folks need to know how to connect, how to be secure without having to go into that institution. And then entertainment. There's all kinds of entertainment that folks do online. I put that one last, not that it's least important, but I think there was always the misconception that the internet was only used for entertainment. And I think now, since pandemic, it's really opened some of our legislators and our funders to say, oh, wait, everyone needs to be connected. It's so much more than just watching movies. Not that that's not important, but it encompasses everything in our everyday life. Chris? So how can we specifically, Extension, work with your organization to develop those digital literacy skills? Help people develop partnerships. I think this is one of the things that it's kind of Extension's niche. We have folks in all 72 counties and on the tribal lands. And that's what we do. We develop those partnerships. We know those individual communities. So as you're working with your individual programs, please feel free to reach out to your Extension staff in those communities. They may not be doing digital literacy, but they know where the partnerships are and where the connections are. Identifying curriculum to teach digital skills. There's a lot of different curriculum out there. I will share some of that curriculum through Anna, and you can share it through your group. We do have some curriculum that we've been using that I worked with the 4-H Tech Changemakers. That's good basic curriculum, but we're also, through my work with the National Digital Extension Education Team, working right now to assess some of the curriculum that's out there nationally by a lot of organizations and put together a chart. Some is free, some there's a charge for after a certain point. And I know you've just received a large grant that allow you to purchase some, but we'll talk a little more about curriculum in a little bit. We can help identify tutors. I know your groups already have tutors, but we can connect you to folks keeping tutors, and expanding your capacity is something we may be able to help you with. Teaching digital skills. Some of our staff will have taught digital skills to different groups and may be able to help you with that. And also identifying some of those resources, facilities that you might use, equipment, different funding. Those are all things that Extension can help play a role with your organization as you work to develop those digital skills. As you look at partners in your community, and notice we've highlighted your community, And I think the reason that's important is what works with Chris in Crandon isn't necessarily what's going to work with somebody over in Green Bay or down in Milwaukee or over in Washburn. It really has to be your community that you're taking a look at. One program isn't going to fit all. You need to ask, where is the greatest need in your community? And take a look. That could be different. I know some of you are working in the jail community. Some of you might be working with workforce development. Some might be working with seniors. There's all kinds of possibilities. We've seen all kinds of programs. And so you need to really identify what's most important for you. And who do your clients, once you identify where your greatest need is, who do the clients already have that trust relationship with? I think that's so important to figure out who they already trust, where they go. Because if you remember back in Chris's slide where he talks about barriers, he said fear was one of them. And so we want to make it as comfortable as possible for folks to learn. Having that learning situation in a place they feel comfortable with people they feel comfortable with. And then I always say, who else would benefit in your community from working on this issue? There's lots of people. We need to look for what I like to say is a win-win relationship. So your clients are going to benefit, but so are the partners that you're working with. If they can get their customers to learn digital skills, they'll be able to utilize and access and buy more products, right? Grocery stores, all the different customers that we can think of where they are and who they might work with. Who might gain workers? Look at workforce development in businesses. Who might gain workers if folks knew how to go online and do fill out an application? Folks who might be able to work remotely if they have those skills. Another one that I always say is who might gain support. This was one as we worked with some of the connected aging communities. As we were working with connected aging communities, the schools came up, the public school system, as a partner. And you'd say, well, why does the public school system care about working with seniors on learning digital skills? Well, they had a win that they were looking for. Who funds public education? Taxpayers, right? And so, and today when we find that folks have to go to referendum in order to exceed caps, they need to make sure folks that don't have students in school right now understand what's going on and support that. So we had a number of our school systems across northern Wisconsin who started to participate in teaching digital skills and opening up their facilities. And one even offered transportation to get to the classes. Another one was offering lunch after the classes. So they met with the students and they could see what the schools were all about. So think about who you might develop that relationship with, because it's not always the most obvious partner that you're going to find. So who might some of those be? Libraries. Chris talked about libraries being the most trusted. That was everyone online. And we did find that with some of our programs as we were working with connected aging communities and our tech change makers. People feel comfortable at libraries. They know their librarian. They go in and ask for help on their computer. And so if they have questions in between, great source for a partner. Economic and workforce development. Churches, so we've seen some churches who've actually set up little computer labs in the back where folks can go and utilize the services there, the internet, and ask questions. Schools are great. Senior centers are another great source. I visited quite a few of them when we were doing our pilots and doing some focus groups. And they have actually witnessed some of them who were doing some tutoring that day. So another great possibility. Healthcare providers can be a great one. And some of our programs have brought in healthcare providers to help with some of that teaching. And they actually learned as much from participating because they learned as they were teaching folks how to use their portals, where the pitfalls were, and were able to adjust some of their platforms to help make it more user-friendly. Housing centers, many of the centers will have access to internet, and so we need to figure out how to partner with them. Financial institutions are another great partner. Financial institutions want us to bank online, but folks don't necessarily know how. So partnering with them to either host the site or do some group teaching with you is all important. And we also have internet service providers. Don't ever forget them. They have an interest too, right? They want customers, but they also need to be able to help get customers and helping see what's available. Some of the internet service providers will offer up space. I've been to a few of them, Marinette and other places that have offered up their office space to host some of the sessions. Some internet service providers will provide like low-cost options. So don't be afraid to reach out to them. And then businesses on a whole are another great partner that you can work with.
Gail, so can I just back up to internet service providers? This is Anna again. So Stacy, who asked the question about if internet providers have to opt into the ACP program, right, and Chris had said no. And so she said that's her challenge, is their provider has not opted into the program, and they are in a small rural community. Do you have any recommendations about how programs or community members could approach their internet provider and encourage them to participate in these programs or to partner?
I think as we've been working with a lot of groups, we find that just inviting them in and having that conversation with them is really important. Some of them are, the smaller ones may not have that program that they're actively participating, but they may have other things that they can participate in. And so just going and talking to them is sometimes helpful. We're finding the same thing is all the internet providers aren't necessarily building out into areas. So how do we get beyond that? Sometimes it's bringing in other providers as a community to talk with them. And so reaching out to folks with community leaders, I think is really important. They can really help those conversations with internet service providers. One of the groups that I was working with, healthcare, also was reaching out to those internet service providers to look at access and how could they make it affordable. There was one group that was talking with home care to make it affordable and looking at could they buy a group subscription to offer low-cost options. One of the hotspots is another one, and checking out. So you might work with that group to look at hotspots that can utilize those connections in there. Now, hotspots might be one of the things that we take a look at with your grant, because I know you can buy some equipment and different things that could do that. So having those conversations and brainstorming with them may be helpful. But always, working with internet service providers, I'm not going to lie to you, can be challenging, but we need to kind of approach that. And those are all kind of ways that you might do that. Other questions? Feel free, Stacy, to ask any questions or follow up there. Comments?
This is Stacy. I'll just weigh in a little bit. So I did call our internet provider. Basically, we have NTech. They're kind of not a monopoly, but they're sort of the best provider we have in the area. And the lady in the office, and no minced words, told me it wasn't worth their time. So there must be like, and I don't know the history or what all goes into reimbursements through program or whatever, but I'm guessing like, if I put my business hat on, is the juice worth the squeeze? And what I got really from her was like, it's just not worth their time to deal with all of the logistics of it. So it didn't sound super promising. And I definitely have had other conversations with networks in my area and some larger businesses just to say like, can we get some help here? Or what have you found that's an option? And I know that we've been semi-successful in partnering with like, it's not Weira, but like our WestCap partners, and they have some internet support, but it's generally like they'll pay for a part of the install or a 1 month subscription, or it's not for an extended period of time. So anyway, we're working our angles here, but that was a very enlightening conversation. So I suspect there might be some, I guess, logistical concerns for smaller internet providers on just making it happen.
It is. Yeah. In fact, that is one of the things that as we work on the governor's task force that's come up is how do we work with those providers and what kind of programs can the state take a look at as providing benefits that reach all of those groups, because you're right, especially some of the small, I mean, they're operating a business and return on investment. And is it worth them doing it to them? We have to figure out if it's not, how do we make that? And that's one of the challenges we're working with and are really trying to figure out how to crack that nut on the task force. We do have providers on there, legislators on there, community organizations, and a few of us in the education capacity. So I understand your frustration. I would continue to try to reach out, and if you can use other groups to reach out with you. And like I said, sometimes that might be, I find economic development and local municipalities sometimes they carry a bigger carrot maybe than a nonprofit organization going in. So trying to partner with some of those as a collective group, I think would be helpful. Maybe we can talk more about this, on an individual basis, or I know we talked about maybe exploring some more options later on at some of your regional meetings, and that might be a topic we want to explore more on with you.
Yeah, thank you for that question. And but that is a little bit of where the rubber meets the road on the affordable connectivity for question and discussion.
Okay, I just saw another question about hotspots there. Can we, let's see, let me see that question that just popped. How well do hotspots work in rural areas? And is there any way to find out where they do and do not work well? There are a number of maps, if you go to the Public Service Commission, that take a look at wireless connections and how those connections work, how well they work. I would caution though that don't assume because it's on the map and says it's going to be covered well that it is. We'll often do testing to see how well those connections are. And I would encourage folks to go out and actually try some devices and go out and check some of those locations. One of the folks that have been helpful is public instruction on doing that. Some of them have used their bus drivers to use hotspots and just check the locations as they're driving, to different locations, because they're already out on the road, right? So check some of those out and see if that connection really works. I'd start with the maps at Public Service Commission, and then I'd go out and actually do some fine testing myself to see how well wireless connection will work in that area. That answer your question? Great. All right, regional partners. Chris, we're going to turn it over to you.
Yep. For just briefly here for a couple of slides. So thank you for that question and discussion as we continue to, I'll speak for myself, I continue to learn more and about this all the time. So on regional partners, the economic development organizations, and I will show you a map of the 9, we call them REDOs, meaning regional economic development organizations statewide on the next slide here in a moment, but are very involved. Economic development entities, not just regional, but local, are very involved in this. My Forest County Broadband Commission is a spinoff of the Forest County Economic Development Group, spun off from that. And the child has become bigger than the adult because both, remember, Forest County, the only county in Wisconsin with 2 tribal entities. And the tribes are, the Economic Development Group has been challenged to have tribal attendance at their meetings. But once we formed the Broadband Commission 3 years ago here, all of a sudden both the Potawatomi and the Mole Lake Chippewa tribe were in attendance and very actively involved at all of the broadband meetings. Also, the Department of Public Instruction, and for a lot of reasons Gail mentioned, the DPI has been great on this. They have also given out hotspots, but let me give you one example right here in the Crandon K through 12 school district. Last year or 2 years ago, it's hard to believe 2 years ago now, but when the pandemic hit in March of 2020 with the lockdowns, the school, of course, was closed for the remaining 3 months of the year here, as they were throughout the state. These kids here did not have adequate broadband service to learn lessons online. And so Gail and I went on and spoke with, among other people, Kurt Kiefer at that time. I think Kurt is retired now, but for the head of the DPI. And Kurt was very bothered by that. Getting that, and so emphasize that point to other entities that were on the call, on the Zoom at that time. The importance of the Department of Workforce Development, I think, is brought up, and their involvement in the teaching of digital skills as we go forward. They will be involved. I've read so many things that how, as you increase your digital skills, your wage and salary go up. I think you can see the connection with their importance. Foundations and private foundations, we want so much for them to be a player in this, and they are indeed anxious to. In Wisconsin, they haven't been a big player yet, but in other states like Minnesota and the Blandin Foundation has been such a huge player over there, having given millions of dollars to broadband deployment as well as digital literacy. And Brittany, the chair of the Governance Task Force, will indeed Brittany Beyer will indeed tell you that the foundations are waiting for us to tell them what to do a little bit, to some degree, with a plan. And they can be a player and a funder of many of the programs if we have the right programs and plans in place. Nonprofits here, such as Digital Bridge, perhaps some of you have heard of, which is mostly involved in equipment, giving out equipment to those who need it. Everyone On, I mentioned because they are now such a player, and they have reports coming out, a series of 3 reports in which they have surveyed more than 2,000 people, and entities such as Microsoft and the Ballmer Group have helped fund those surveys because they're expensive to conduct and carry out, especially when you're calling people because there's no other way to contact them. They can't be contacted online. And they've come out with reports on affordability and the digital divide that are very important sources of information. Perhaps some of you have heard of Wisconsin Mujer, or Wisconsin Women, I believe, out of the Spanish, has been involved in this as we deploy broadband in all areas of the state and certainly rural areas. Gail had brought up the importance of telehealth repetitively. This is such a big player and will increasingly be a big player in counties like I'm in right now, Forest County, which is a long distance in some cases. Forest County does have the Potawatomi Health Center, which is important, but also in Vilas County, where I live, in some cases, a long distance to doctor service and have aging populations. And then, of course, WISTA, as representative of the State Telecommunications Association, the internet service providers are indeed and should be a regional partner in this to address issues such as the question that was the important question that was brought up just 5 minutes ago. Just a map for your benefit, more than anything. Anna requested it. It's a map that's, these are the redos, the regional economic development organizations, and you can pick which one you live in. I live in Region 5 up there in purple, the Grow North region, and I interact considerably with my Regional Economic Development Director, Brittany Beyer. I know her well. In this case, I'm blessed with the advantage that Brittany is also the chair of the Governor's Task Force on Broadband. And so, whereas I interact with her quite a bit from an economic development and broadband perspective, Gail interacts with Brittany even more frequently than I do, being on the end. We've learned a lot, all of us together. Brittany, Gail, I have all learned quite a bit together. It's Gail.
Okay, the Governor's Task Force. Anna mentioned I do serve on the Governor's Task Force, and we have been working on the task force since summer of 2020 and issued our first report. We have been looking at ways that we can advise the governor and the state legislature, whether it's on policy, strategies, some of the funding, some of the questions you've already talked about, and putting forth a plan for hopefully to access some of those federal and state dollars that are coming through. We really want to make sure we're making the most of those and benefiting and getting folks connected. There is a link there to the report. If you just, you can go back and look at the recording, or you can just Google and find the report online from the Governor's Task Force, and it will lay out different things for access, adoption, and affordability, because we are looking at all three of those. Even though the report does mention access, we know it's not enough. Okay, Chris. Those are the three areas that we've been highlighting, and we're really looking at how do we work together to develop some of these and do recommendations. The task force meetings are open meetings, and you can hear how we're addressing them. You can see some of the documents that are online, but you can see this, a number of the recommendations that were made. Those are just the key recommendation in each one. And there are lots of different recommendations, and hopefully you will see some of these coming to fruition soon, especially as some of those dollars start to trickle down, because we are finding more of those dollars being available for adoption. And affordability is now one of those things we're starting to look at more closely, because if people can't afford it, it's not going to be as sustainable and they're not going to adopt it. So building it alone is not going to be the answer. Chris? Active network building. This is what we're concentrating this year. This hits probably closest to what your organization is looking at. We're looking at active network building to build access, but also how do we look at building more adoption. And through that, our first sessions this year, we're looking at how do we build those with local communities, counties, anchor institutions, some of the things we've already talked about. Our next meeting, we're going to be concentrating on regional, and we know from our experience and searching out and doing research about what's available regionally and best case scenarios, the economic development organizations that Chris just showed that map, they're some of the folks that operate best regionally. So connecting with those folks, I know a few of you have reached out to those, will be helpful. We'll be also looking at anchor institutions and providers and other organizations that operate across those lines. The last thing our task force is really going to work on this year is statewide. How do we get better communications with statewide agencies? Even knowing a lot of agencies have little touch points on broadband, and especially how we're seeing more and more dollars are trickling out. We want to make sure we're utilizing those dollars in the best way possible. And how do we utilize the dollars we're getting to leverage other dollars from the federal and from foundations and all those different groups. So we're really taking a look at how those state associations, how state agencies, how philanthropic groups can all work together, organizations, on a statewide level. So that's kind of how we're trying to pull some of this together for Wisconsin and make recommendations to the governor and the legislature. Okay, Chris?
And so jump in for a slide here, I am, while Gail is on the governor's task force on broadband access, I'm on the Wisconsin Digital Equity and Inclusion Stakeholders Group, which began to coalesce, if you will, and probably in August of last year, led by Alyssa Kenny. If you know Alyssa at the Wisconsin Public's, the Wisconsin Broadband Office is in the Wisconsin Public Service Commission. And so really, we're starting to gel here just now, but the Digital Equity and Inclusion Stakeholders Group's purpose is to grow and strengthen the digital inclusion ecosystem defined below by the NDIA, the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, as we put together, develop and inform really the Digital Equity and Inclusion Plan for the state of Wisconsin. And I am so delighted to be a part of that because really, ladies and gentlemen, I think that this digital equity and inclusion situation where the lower income folks are left out, lower income of all racial and ethnic groups, is frankly perhaps the leading civil rights issue of our day. And it's quite a challenge within not just Wisconsin, but the entire United States. This situation, other countries do a little bit better job of this, getting everybody online. But here, our costs and again, the end game being teaching digital skills to those is I consider it to be, again, perhaps the leading civil rights issue of the day.
Just a few things on curriculum. I know we're getting close to the end and want to allow you to ask some questions, but I think I really want to encourage you. Some of the things we found through our pilots and our research is the need to be flexible. A lot of times we go in with a curriculum and say, this is what we're going to teach, and we lose people after that first session. So you really need to be flexible, and the content really needs to be based on your audience. A lot of our groups have found that they go in maybe with one topic that has a hook to attract people, the audience. They might sign up for something, whether it's, how do I find that low cost option? The other hooks have been, how do I do shopping and gearing that at Christmas time. There's all kinds of hooks. Scams and safety seem to be a really good one for bringing folks in. And then surveying people who actually come and are interested and asking them what they want to learn. I think those are really important things as you're looking at curriculum. Keeping those formal part of the session short with very limited concept, I think is really important. We're going to work on trying to pull a list together for you that my colleagues are working on for different curriculums, and I'll share that through Anna. So you'll all have access to some of that, because there's lots of curriculum out there. You don't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel. Chris? I think one of the big things with teaching and tutoring is you got to remember tutors can come from a wide variety of sources, and your lessons need to be short. What we found is the general lesson, if you have a lesson that's 10 to 15 minutes with very limited concepts, that's what you need, and then be able to provide that hands-on experiential learning. That's essential. I always say people need to be able to practice things 3 times so we know they're able to do it. And that's not here, I'll show you. It's show them and then actually have them practice and show you again. So you know that they are getting the concept. Another thing to really help hone in on those concepts is to provide some type of written material. Remember, if the folks you're working with don't have the digital skills, they're probably used to paper. And so having some kind of cheat sheets or written support materials with very basic steps, not like reading a manual, but basic steps so they can go back. And supporting those concepts with some homework assignments. So they're going to go home and practice going online, doing a search, whatever it might be. So they practice it and then ask them the very next time, what did you do? How did that go? Did you have any problems before you hit the next concept? And participants then need some kind of avenue for support. And this is where, remember, libraries were really great. A library might be a support system in between sessions where folks can go. We also have folks that set up special email accounts so people could contact if they needed help. So you got to figure out how to make that support so they come back again. Chris? So those are some of the big things we wanted to hit. We know we didn't do everything, but we're coming up to the end of our time. But Chris and I really appreciate that you invited us. We're more than excited to work with your organization. I know Anna and I and Chris have talked about maybe regional meetings coming up where we can hone in on some of this. So we're excited if that's something you're interested in pursuing. You can always contact Chris and I if you have questions in between, and we'll try to work with you to get the resources you need.
Thank you so much, Gail and Chris. So they gave us a lot of information, a lot of different connections. So I invite you to kind of reflect on what you heard today and reach out to your regional consultant. We're all thinking about regional meetings right now in the spring. And it is a perfect opportunity to really dive into some of these ideas and look at what might make sense in your region. As far as next steps and how to be involved. I will continue, I'll have you all on the list that I'll send any information that Gail and Chris forward to me. We'll also be putting this recording on our website along with the resources that they provide. So we'll send that information out to you. So real quickly, does anybody have a question with 1 minute? We have the PowerPoint. Gail and Chris, can I have a copy of the PowerPoint?
Chris, you want to send that out right away?
All right, so yes, we will send that. Thank you. Any other thoughts? All right, well, thank you very much. And everyone keep reflecting, and we appreciate your passion and your dedication to this. And this is something that we've been working on for years, and certainly it has moved to the forefront recently with the pandemic. So thank you very much, and thank you everybody for your time.
Thank you very much.